Hello and welcome to Melee's Turnwheel, the series that takes a retroactive look at the Fire Emblem series chapter by chapter. I'm your host, iMain Melee Kirby, and today we're wrapping up Fire Emblem Thracia 776. I'm very excited today for it's a very special episode for a few reasons. First of all, I have once again the pleasure of recording with my friend AdmiralSpyke. How you doing, Spike?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's always a pleasure. I enjoyed recording the last episode with you quite a bit, so I'm always happy to have you back on. The other reason, sorry.
Always good to have human companionship in this cold and cruel world.
So true. Way to start the episode off on a pleasant note.
Well, we're talking about Thracia 776. There can only be
true.
There's only so much positivity to go around.
Yeah, I don't know if I could handle Thracia by myself the entire time, so I'm glad to have you here with me. The other reason that this episode is pretty special, in my opinion, is that this is going to go up around the point of the second anniversary of me starting this series, which is pretty fun. I'm averaging one game a year, but that's very heavily influenced by the fact that I took like a 10-month break for like right in the middle there. So I'm hoping that it won't be this long in the future. We'll have to see. If I stick to the 2 week per episode thing, then I'll probably end up doing 2 games a year. So still in this for the long haul.
It's a lore accurate recreation of the Yid Desert Crossing. Takes 10 months.
Yes, it's true. I was recording episodes to be in line with the actual timeline of the game.
Yeah, exactly.
So, last episode, I asked you guys a question, and the question was, who is your favorite character in Thracia 776? I got a pleasant variety of responses. I'm going to read the Twitter ones first, as usual, and then maybe you and I, Spike, can talk about our opinions. But yeah, let's start off with what I got on Twitter. @Biozilla said, Leaf is perhaps my favorite FE character. I often gravitate toward emotionally driven protagonists. I think it's easy to empathize with him in spite or even because of his rashness and naivete. The probably intentional parallels between him and Marth also intrigue me. Now, that's interesting. We might talk a little bit about that because I've never really thought of Leaf and Marth as being particularly similar. But I've never really given it more thought.
It's interesting because this is where you get the connection point between Leaf, Marth, and Dimitri, where all three of these characters kind of fall into similar categories, I think, which is very strange. You would never sit down and think, yes, Marth, Leaf, and Dimitri should be categorized together as Fire Emblem words. Because they have redemption arcs as leaders and as rulers. Marth's is probably the most simplified. It's basically only in Shadow Dragon where it's really a thing. But all of them get completely punked by life in one way or another, and they, on their own emotional and mental hangups, can't make it to where they need to be to do their jobs. And eventually they go through hardships and overcome trials and understand themselves better, and then they become the leader they need to be to save their kingdom, liberate whatever, It happens to all three of them in different ways, but they're pretty similar structures. If you think about Dimitri having to get back to Fergus and liberate Ferdiad as the same thing as Marth liberating Altea and Leaf liberating Leinster, think about how those kind of happen at like the 75 to 80% mark of their games. Marth not so much, because his game is a little more padded at the end, but they have pretty similar arcs, I think.
Yeah, and that return to their homeland is considered like a turning point in their character, for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. I know for Marth especially, there's a lot going on there because that's when he finds out that his mom's dead and that his sister's been kidnapped. Leaf obviously has the whole stuff that goes on with Dorius, and then Dimitri, I don't remember very well what happens to his character. I mean, I remember what happens to his character, obviously, but at that point in the story specifically, I don't really remember what goes on there.
He sort of, his is probably the least like impactful of the three. I still think his is very good because I was like pointing at the three like, holy shit, it's Marth from Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon put in 3 houses. And I was like, but Dimitri basically he believes that he is not fit to lead his people after his feral episode, and he's like super down on himself, and his friends have to step up to him and be like, dude, you went through a lot of shit, and you're here now. You saved them. They wanted you back, and it's your job to live up to their expectations. Whether you think you can or not, you better. And he's like, oh man, fine, I'll stop being edgy and start doing paperwork. Literally, the next scene after that, you do a paralogue right after, and Dimitri's like, God, I've been at my desk for hours, and Violet's like, tell me about it, man. It's one of the only, it's like, rare in Three Houses has just, like, good writing, like, good, like, casual writing. I mean, that's actually where Three Houses is at its best, is in its casual writing, but, like, just watching Dimitri and Violet complain about paperwork was a surprisingly good moment for me. But,
yeah, and I mean... Yeah. If that moment goes how you describe, then I would say that that's probably the only time I can think of where Byleth has an actual personality. Which is kind of the point. But I mean, you know, I guess we're getting ahead of ourselves a little there.
A little, about, tiny bit,
like 6 years ahead of ourselves at the rate I'm going.
Hey, you just came back with Divine Pulse to talk about it.
Exactly.
You pop back up to turn 35 on the Gronder field map.
Okay. So that was Biozilla's response. Gave us a lot to talk about that. I've never really thought about that, but you bring up some really good points, Spike, and I'm wondering, you know, if that's what he meant, and if so, you know, that's really cool. I never thought about that.
I think so. I think that's the liberating prince archetype is kind of the one. Whereas I don't think Roy is like supposed to be like that, but he ends up being more of his own thing because of the whole Idun stuff.
Yeah, and I mean he never needs to liberate his own country, really, right? Like unless
the Lycian Alliance is like under attack in the first few chapters, but after that, it's him going around defending other places on more of like he's almost more of like a Seliph sort of guy.
Yeah,
if anything.
That's fair. At Tellius Bias says, I haven't gotten to Thracia yet. I've taken a bit too long wrapping up genealogy, but I always thought it was really cool that you got a female Jagan and Avel. I know you're technically supposed to bench them eventually, but I gotta make the strong lady a party mainstay.
God, he knows.
I didn't have the heart to tell him. Oh, you think he knows?
I'm pretty sure he knows about the whole Chapter 3 incident, but I guess technically Chapter 5 incident, but...
Yeah, you kind of, if you're playing blind, you kind of get that copium of like, oh, she's back. I got her for a little bit in Chapter 5.
She can go ham in that arena if you let her.
Oh, yeah, for sure. She took out like most of the guys. I ended up getting Galzus to show up, which I didn't even know until this most recent. I didn't even know until this most recent playthrough that he could show up.
Yep, he's the one that completely cuts out any chance of her like winning.
Yeah, for sure.
They're like, okay, they're getting too lucky sending Galzus.
Yeah,
but Avel's really cool. I really like her design. I'm really glad that they brought back Brigid. The memory loss thing's a little weird, but I think it works out pretty well. Yeah,
I mean, I think Avel. I was completely neutral on Avel when I started this playthrough, and then I played 24X, which overall I wouldn't recommend, but it skyrocketed my opinion on Avel because she gets a lot of really good character moments in that chapter. I guess that's as good a segue as any to talk about some of our favorite characters. I kind of have two answers in mind, but I'll let you go first, Spike.
Oh, jeez.
Putting you on the spot.
In the interest of diverse opinions, I will say probably one of the next most popular choices, which is August, is probably my favorite character. He's one of the more complex characters morally and like in terms of their role in the story.
Yeah, August is very interesting. I like him a lot. The fact that he's so, I mean, like you said, he's kind of morally ambiguous. He clearly has a checkered past. They don't go into a lot of detail about, which I'm kind of more happy about. because I don't want, I think it's more interesting kind of left up to imagination. But he's clearly trying to do the right thing and sort of redeem himself. So he's a good character.
And seeing his situation gradually get revealed over the course of the game, but also seeing him gradually warm up to Leaf and Dorius as he gets more accustomed to them and gets more accustomed to compromising his beliefs. But he still very much believes the things he does. Like, even later in the game, Dorius is like, it'll be an honor to die a knight's death, and August is like, don't push that shit on people who aren't knights. Some people actually want to protect themselves and not run off on suicide or whatever.
Yeah,
and Dorius is like, how dare you? And August is like, I'm just saying, man, it's the truth.
It is, yeah. He's very pragmatic. I think I've talked a lot about this, but I think Dorius and August complement each other so well. August being the more pragmatic, and then Dorius being the more like kind of inspiring.
Idealist.
Idealistic. Yeah, that's probably the right word for it. And they both are like necessary. They kind of like balance each other out in an interesting way.
They're yin and yang.
Yep, exactly. Very interesting dynamic there. But I know, so you can go ahead and be honest, because I'm pretty sure I know who your favorite character in this game is. Isn't it Leaf?
I mean, I it's hard because I legitimately do think it might be August.
Okay.
There are other like, I think I could go between August and Leaf on any given day, because I think Leaf is like the best character in the series, generally speaking. But for FE5 specifically, I think August might eke it out. It's just that taking FE4 and all of FE4's content into account, I think Leaf is the best overall. Yep,
that's the exact reason that I have two answers, because one of them is like my favorite character in the game is Finn. He's so good. He has so many great like dad moments. He is just such a great character. Has a lot of good interactions with Nana and Leaf, Avel, Selfina, all these guys. He is just so, some of the context we get about some of the stuff he does to help Leaf in this game is very interesting. But a lot of it also comes from FE4, which is why I think you can consider it kind of cheating. So I have a second best option here as well, which is Shanam. I love Shanam. He's definitely my favorite FE5 only character. Because he's just really funny. I think he's legitimately maybe the funniest character in the entire series for me.
I mean, I think the Astra scene is legitimately the single funniest piece of FE content that has ever been written.
I think you might be right about that.
I think it's literally could be a stand-up comedy routine. I mean, it basically is.
It's pretty much a stand-up routine. You're completely right.
If I'm going to toss in any honorable mentions, Dagdar is great.
Dagdar is really good. Yeah, I don't have him near the top of my list personally, but I definitely see why you would. He's really good. Avel is the first honorable mention that comes to mind for me. Well, August as well. So there are a few really good contenders in this game for great characters.
Olwen is also pretty cool, but I would not put Olwen on the same level as the other ones I mentioned, or Dagdar. Yeah. But I think Olwen is a pretty cool character as well.
That's interesting. I mean, like I'm basically neutral on Olwen. I don't really have a strong opinion on her. I'm curious. I'm curious what it is you like about her, because we've talked about it a little bit, but I don't think I've ever really gotten a sense of what you like about her.
So I think that Olwen is one of the only good times they did the enemy general is unaware of atrocities and then is like, wait, this is awful. I need to switch sides. Because there's literally another worse version of it later in the game with Amalda, where she literally gets an out and then just goes, I'm going to go back for a while and potentially fight you again, even after seeing like I shouldn't be a bad guy anymore. I still like Amalda. I think she's got a cool design, but Olwen is just like, you fight her, she sees like both Kempf being Kempf and figuring out from the prisoners that, wait a minute, war crimes are bad. And then, like, if you're the sheltered like sister of a general who like gets like cushioned from all the horrible like war stuff, it would actually be possible to not really understand what was happening. So I think her making that transition is cool. And then in her painfully annoying conversation to get with Reinhardt, with the Blessed Sword, where Reinhardt does his dumb suicide by cop thing with her, instead of legitimately trying to make some sort of moral justification for his unjustifiable actions. She's like, bro, you can't be serious. And he's like, I'm not serious, but I'm also not going to defend myself. And then just dies. So yeah. I like that. I like that Olwen grows enough to call Reinhardt out on his shit in her last scene of the game.
Yeah, no, I think that's reasonable. I think her growth over the course of the game is pretty good.
I think it's just fine. I don't think she's like stellar or anything, but like, it's cool.
No, I feel you. I do feel the need to defend Amalda real quick, because I actually on this replay I never really paid her much mind, but I do think that her character is pretty interesting, because the reason she doesn't go like join you immediately is because she wants to like kind of work as a mole from the inside and like get more kids out, basically.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot that little detail.
So I think that's pretty cool of her, but I definitely don't blame you for forgetting, because I also completely forgot that until this most recent replay.
I think just me replaying it and her being on 16B, and I'm like, just don't be there. What are you doing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, but yeah, so this game has a character. There's a lot of awesome characters in this game. One of the best casts in the series overall, in my opinion.
Yeah, probably.
I think it goes to kind of highlight the quality of the writing in this game, which I think is a good point to talk about the writing in this game. The reason, Spike, I've told you this already, but the reason that I wanted to have you on for this episode specifically is because, you know, this is kind of the point for me to think about my final thoughts on this game, kind of give my overall opinion on it. And I know that you and I disagree about how we feel about this game. You quite like it. I don't like it. So I think it's going to be interesting to kind of hash out kind of what our opposing viewpoints on this game are. But I think generally we both agree that the writing is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, for sure. The writing strength of the game is pretty consistent up through pretty much the end of the game. I think literally the only chapters, like at the end, there's a couple of chapters that aren't like. I think Raedric is kind of like a cop-out villain at the end.
Yeah,
and then
for sure.
Veld is even more of a cop-out villain at the end. But other than those two, I don't think the game is especially weak in terms of writing at any point, which is kind of insane.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an incredibly consistently good story. I think my main problems are more from like wanting it to take ideas further, versus having any problems with like what is actually in the game.
Yeah.
For example, I know they kind of like early on in the game, they kind of talk about Quan and how he is kind of like not all he was cracked up to be. August challenges Leaf's views on him a little bit and kind of like gets him thinking about what like Leaf's own viewpoints and his own perspective on things. And then they never really do anything with that again, and it's kind of goes back to the FE4 default of like, yeah, Quan was cool and based.
Oh yeah, I do kind of wish they pushed that further, because if they're gonna make Trevant more of a sympathetic villain, they should probably make Quan less sympathetic too, huh? Try to balance it out a little, rather than just be like, actually everyone was nice and good and they were being manipulated or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the scene where August talks to Leaf about that stuff, I believe it's in chapter 8X, is probably my favorite moment in the game narratively, because it's kind of like really poignant for me, and I think it kind of I think it encapsulates a lot of like flaws in thinking that are you know they're common in you know our real world. One of the things that he says, like Leaf is talking to August and is like, why did they not just get jobs or whatever, or something like that?
He literally says, why would you be poor when you could just make more money? He literally says that.
Exactly.
Just farm.
Like, you
just
know,
farm
simply
in your rocks
just farm,
and,
dude.
Like barren soil. Just do better, bro. Because he doesn't know better. He doesn't understand how the world works.
Exactly, right. He's a kid. So I think that, that moment really hit well for me, and I think it solidified August as being one of my favorite characters in the game. I just really wish that they would have gone further with it and brought it up a couple more times.
Yeah, the problem is that the arc going up to Tara kind of shifts away from stuff. Like, it kind of focuses more on we need to get to Tara now rush, and kind of cuts out a lot of the story, and then they briefly cut back to it in the mid-game. But that focuses more on, we need to get to Leinster now. Like,
yeah,
it gets a bit destination oriented in the mid-game. Whereas in the Manster arc, in the aftermath of the Manster arc, they're more in limbo, and they can more focus on like story themes and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's also at a point in the story. It's at a point in the story where Leaf needs that information more than ever.
Exactly. Yep.
Because he's untethered. He's angry and kind of lashing out at his surroundings, and is mad at the world. And August needs to like put his hands on his shoulders and tell him to grow up, basically.
Yeah, and I think it comes off the heels, not like literally in the next chapter, but pretty soon after chapter 6, I think, where Leaf is like, I would do anything to get Avel back, and August is like, even work with Thracia, and Leaf is like, well, maybe not anything. So he's got like that really strong hatred of Thracia that I think August really needs to have him like work through, and that's kind of like an ongoing theme over the course of the game, is him like working through that hatred and kind of figuring out how to like view the world in more than just black and white terms. I think that there's like a lot of filler in the section of the game immediately following. I guess not a lot, but they go to what is it? They do after that they meet Dorius, and they do all the chapter 9 stuff, and then they do Fort Doldrum, which is like 3 chapters when it really probably could have gotten away with 2. Then there's like 2 chapters dedicated to the Dacia bandits, which probably could have been spent on more story content. I don't know. It just feels a little weird to me. That section of the game is quite...
It's a bit clunky.
Yeah. That it's a little bit. I don't know what the right word is, but
it's
lacking.
It's drawn out.
Lacking.
It's drawn
out.
out.
I would say lacking in substance is the word. The word
lacking in substance is a good choice of words.
Yeah. So,
you could definitely also like, heck, imagine if 12 and 12X were the same map, and there was just the building just like stretched to the left and it was just, like exaggerated.
Yeah. No, I think that's that would have been good. They could have really cut that down for sure.
Like, say you capture Salem, and then the inside of the building reveals itself, and it's the second half of the map.
Oh, that could have been cool, yeah. Especially since like chapter 12 is so nothing. You just go and you like it's way bigger than it needs to be. You kill some bandits, you capture Salem, and that's basically the whole map. So I don't know. We're kind of delving into this. We said that we both feel unambiguously fantastic about the story, and then we're just we're kind of like shit talking it a bunch. But I think really these are pretty much the only problems, and I think they're relatively minor. When the story succeeds, it really really succeeds. I mean, the whole like everything from chapter 1 to like chapter 7 or 8, maybe 8X. Is just like a fucking masterpiece. The buildup of Leaf getting to, kind of like starting on his quest and then having that like almost immediately subverted and kind of pulled, like the rug gets pulled out from under him. He loses everything like right away. It's like if they put, I guess it's not his darkest hour because it'll come, like that'll come when he fails to capture Ulster later in the game. But it's like the story has 2 lowest points, and they decided to put one right at the beginning, which is very interesting.
Yeah, basically the idea is that Leaf needs to be when Leaf is brought down the first time is when he was already at a low point. He's like on a slight upswing and then gets slammed into the ground really hard, and then he spends the rest of the game either neutral or going up. So the fact that he, after thinking that okay, I screwed up once, I'm not going to screw up again, and then he does. That's the it won't happen again, and then it does. It's the clincher for the Ulster failure.
Yeah.
And the consequences are even graver because everything about Manster gradually gets reversed over the course of the story because he rescues Nana immediately, and then Marita gets relieved from the control of the Shadow Sword, and then they complete objectives, and then they're getting ready to go back to Manster after they do their liberation thing, and like everything's falling into place. And then the Ulcer happens, and then Dorius dies, and the consequence that Dorius dying can't be undone.
Yeah. I mean, even like, you know, Avel. August says like Avel's as good as dead, but Leaf is pretty consistently holding out hope throughout the game that she can be revived, even if it's kind of like probably a false hope as far as he's aware. But he still has that. As he's like, she's technically not dead, so I can still have her back. Dorius has that sense of finality to it, where it's like he's gone, he's never coming back. You can't, you fucked up big time.
And he willingly goes off to his death, which adds some extra meat to it. Dorius is like, "Yep, I'm gonna die, and it will give Prince Leaf the resource. It will be a tactical resource to Leaf that I go and die now." And
yeah,
that stings. That stings. That's Dorius saying, "Leaf screwed up so bad, I have to go die to set things right."
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. I would say it's a really great moment. I'm sure, you know, unpopular opinion. Chapter 19 of Fire Emblem Thracia 776 is good.
Impossible.
We kind of glossed over the whole Tara part of the story. Like we talked about like getting to Tara, but then after he leaves Tara, it's kind of I don't even really like what 14X happens. Oh, and then it's the route split. Yeah, so
yep, route split, and then Road to Leinster.
Yeah,
there's effectively no downtime.
Yeah, it's pretty, you know, and those are more. I wouldn't necessarily call those filler, because I do think like everything that happens in them moves the plot forward. I don't think there's any like wasted time there. I mean, I guess they could have made the route split one chapter, but I don't think that like I think 2 chapters is solid for sure. I don't think they it didn't feel like they were rushing through that or dragging that out in any way.
Mm-hmm. I think 2 to 3 chapters is the general good length for a route split in FE. I think anything longer than that, and it gets a bit laborious, and a 1 chapter route split is kind of pointless.
Yeah, no, I would agree. But yeah, and then all the stuff happens with Dorius, and then the final stretch of the game is a lot more like in line with what we would see in a traditional Fire Emblem game. I mean, I guess, you know, saying that this game isn't traditional is maybe not accurate, but I think it definitely tries to do a lot more with its story than most games do. And the end is quite, I would say, similar to a lot of games, you know, like FE 12 or FE 11. The GBA games.
It's funny because FE5 is both super weird, but it also serves as the foundation for the modern understanding of Fire Emblem.
In a lot of ways,
like,
yeah.
It's the first. It is the first incarnation of modern FE. Think about like the NES FE games. FE 1 and 3 are weird, different games. Gaiden is Gaiden, and FE4 is FE4. Like, they have like FE1 and FE3 have like weapon level and stuff, and like a whole bunch of other quirks and weirdness about them. Gaiden speaks for itself. FE4 also speaks for itself. Completely. The flirting FE4 versus harassment Gaiden. But FE5 is the first, like, everyone, you see things, you're like, oh, yep, that's weapon ranks, you hit enemies and your weapon rank goes up, and then you can use better weapons. Characters promote with a Master Seal. Yo, it's just like Fire Emblem Awakening. It's,
yeah.
Like, there's a lot of staple things in this game that are stuck around for most, if not all, of the series.
Yeah.
While also being a fucking weird-ass, like, mad experiment with capturing and super fog and the prison map and ballistas and infinite range staves and
reinforcements that come for like 60 to 100 turns.
Yeah, infinite reinforcements. Literally infinite reinforcements on some maps, mind you, not just like, oh god, they have reinforcements for a very long time to annoy you into going somewhere else. No, literally infinite reinforcements on some maps.
Yeah.
13. After you get to Glade, and you kill the boss that's there at the start. Mm-hmm. Literally infinite freed troops spawn at the top of the map.
That's fucking insane.
They literally will never. They will never end. You have to escape into the city, into Chapter 14, to end the reinforcements.
Or you could.
It's like you could deranged.
You could stay and get all your units to 2020. Smile.
What happens then is you fatigue all of them, and you have no units for Chapter 14.
That's true. You got me there.
Yep, it's a trap. Actually, my second run of the game. I'm like, oh, now that I know these guys are infinite because I looked at the WAD, I can farm all this EXP, and all my good carry units were fatigued, and I didn't have enough S strings to get them all back, so I was like screwed.
Yeah, no, that's
like, Orson was fatigued, Finn was fatigued, Glade was fatigued on his first map. Like Marita was fatigued, I think. No, she wasn't, because I saved her to grind in the arena. Which is my like go-to strategy now, is just grind Marita in the Chapter 14 arena until she promotes, and then just she becomes broken.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so overall, I think this game has I say that the end is pretty mundane. I don't think I used the word mundane. It's pretty standard by FE standards. But I also think that there's a lot of things that I really like about it. I think there's some really good stuff in there with Avel. Sias is a cool character that shows up at the end. There's a great conversation between not Finn, Sed and Leaf in Chapter 23. That's a fucking excellent conversation. The
banger chapter for the story content.
Absolutely. There's a lot of like, I guess, lore or like background information. So stuff like the Deadlords are never really explained, but they kind of have like a sinister implication to them that's really cool. Like the fact that like Sarah was locked, like what my interpretation is that Sarah, like Manfroy was planning on making Sarah into a Deadlord the whole time, which makes it really fucking scary to think about. Like if you didn't recruit her, she's just being like raised for slaughter, basically.
Yeah, he probably wanted to keep control of all the people that could use the Kia staff as well.
Yeah, that probably sounds right.
So both that and just generally being a horrible human being.
Oh yeah, for sure. Stuff like Beowulf, not Beowulf, Fergus being able to use the Beo sword and the Bragi sword for some fucking reason that's never explained.
It's so hard because like on the one hand it makes so much sense for Fergus to be Beowulf's illegitimate son, but at the same time I'm pretty sure someone just really liked Fergus. Like I think that's the actual reason is Kaga's like, I love this Fergus guy. He has 5 PCC. He goes hard. You get him a master. He carries you. You give him the flame sword. Like Kaga's literally just like, this guy's cool. Yeah. Let him use all the crazy swords. Like, just do it. He doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think you might be right.
I think that's the real answer. But it's cool to speculate at the same time because Kaga's also insane enough to do the other stuff.
Oh yeah, Kaga is a fucking psychopath. In sometimes the best, sometimes the worst possible ways. And we're gonna talk more about that later on. But before we move on from the writing, I think we could talk briefly about the villains, or to be more accurate, the lack of villains, at least lack of good villains.
Yeah,
I got like
so like setting aside, let's like lay out our villains that we want to talk about because we can set aside like per chapter villains that don't really matter.
Yeah,
unless there's any of them that you really want to point out. Like
no, not really.
Yeah, I guess we could talk about Gomez.
Well, I mean, I don't like Gomez is really just he's there as a vehicle for August.
He's there as a plot. He's there as a plot device. He's not really a guy. Yeah. Then we only need to talk about the high profile guys, which is we've got Manfroy. Not Manfroy. I mean, we could talk about Manfroy.
I would say
I think we talked about him.
I would say we should start with the major villains, of which, in my opinion, there's only 2. I don't think Reinhardt counts. Reinhardt's barely around.
Yeah, Reinhardt is more of like a lore / like story building character.
Yeah, for sure. I think the 2 major villains of the game are Raedric and Veld.
Do we even count? Does Veld count? He's not there either.
I mean, he's the final boss. He has to count as a major villain, right? Like, no, trust me, I get it. I'm also like,
let's
what?
Start with let's start with Veld then. Let's get him out of the way because there's not much to talk
exactly.
about.
He's just nothing. He's just such a nothing fucking character.
Do you know which character has more personality than Veld? The fucking chapter 1 Sandima, I think his name is, from FE4.
Yes.
That guy is more interesting than Veld. That guy is more entertaining. He's more like sinister and diabolical. He's more of a manipulator than Veld is.
Yeah, exactly. They should have brought Sandima back for this,
bring back
this
Sandima.
chapter.
Justice for Sandima. Also bring Reincock.
I was gonna say Reincock.
Well.
Bring back Reincock.
Right.
He's the best villain.
Justice for Reincock.
Yeah, I mean, he's not sinister, he's not threatening. He turns, the best thing that I would say he has going for him as a villain is that, Leaf has a very strong motivation to want to beat him, because he's the one who turns Avel to stone at the beginning. But beyond that, Leaf doesn't have...
They literally don't interact.
Exactly.
They don't interact.
You know, they're not, he's not, taunting him or anything. They don't have any kind of, personal investment in each other. It's just, Veld did a thing that I don't think Leaf is always talking about, throughout the entire game, wanting to get Avel back. He never once says, I'm gonna stop Veld and make sure he can't do that to anyone else ever again. He just wants Avel. That's the only thing that he brings up.
Yeah, Raedric at least directly gives Leaf shit.
Yeah, they're kind of they kind of taunt each other. They kind of are at each other's throats a little bit. You know, they're it's like a little game of cat and mouse. Raedric, I like Raedric. I mean, he's incredibly simple, but I think he does his job. I think he's great as the front man. You know, he's great as the Narcian, or as the fucking some minor comedy antagonist. You know, as the stepping stone up to the big bad. But there's just no.
The problem is that there's nothing to step up to.
Exactly, right. He's the villain with the most story presence. So, they don't treat him like he is. You know.
Yeah, I think the other problem is that it's pretty obvious that I think the structure of the game lends to the idea that there was supposed to be more content involving North Thracia, if anything. Because the Tara chapter with Trevant seizing Tara and all of that, and there's all this content pointing at Arion and Altena and Trevant, and that never goes anywhere. It's all just window dressing for FE4. Where I feel they probably intended for you to have to fight Trevant at some point in this game.
That would make sense. Yeah, have him a Galza style super boss that comes in in turn 30 or whatever.
Yeah, because the way the game is structured at the moment, it's the middle of the game. I think is the biggest issue. It's sort of I can't believe I have to say this. It reminds me a bit of Valm in Awakening, where. You have the first few chapters that are a focused narrative about fighting one enemy territory group thing, and then it cuts away to this technically related but very disjointed storytelling thing. Obviously, much less so in FE5 compared to Awakening.
Yeah, absolutely.
The villains from here don't really translate, because from chapter 9, 8 or 9, no, chapter 8, all the way up to chapter 21 or 22, you just don't see Veld or Raedric.
Yeah, they're just completely
gone
irrelevant.
For the middle of the game, which makes me feel like the middle of the game was supposed to be the holy shit, we have to deal with Thracia section, where the first half is fighting Tara, and then the second half is, well, fuck you, Trevant, you muscled in on us. Because they're wait a minute, we need to end our FE game at some point, and we don't have the time to develop a game that goes further than chapter 24. So we're just gonna have them go back to Manster instead of doing anything more. It's just unfortunate. It
is, yeah. And
this is speculation, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously the specifics are complete speculation, but we do know for a fact that this game has a fairly significant amount of content, because there's 6 characters that were in the game files to be used at some point, and they just aren't. There's Gian, Asalo, I think Ahmed is in there. There's a couple more.
Yeah. Several of the substitute characters are in there.
Yeah. So I don't know what their role in the story would have been, but I think it's safe to say that at least some story content got got chopped and was left on the cutting room floor. I mean, I'm not exactly, like, Thracia has a very solid sized cast anyway, so it's not like a huge loss. I'm always down for more Asalo content, but otherwise it's not really a huge loss. It's interesting to think about, like, what could have been. We really have no idea what it would have ended up looking like. But okay, so I don't know about you. Well, I kind of do know about you, but I personally have had enough of complimenting Fire Emblem Thracia 776. So I think now is as good a time as any to switch over to kind of the gameplay, although that's kind of broad. I mean it more in the sense of like talking about where our opinions on this game differ, and most of that happens to come down on the side of the gameplay, I would say.
Yeah, probably.
So
don't think there's many other places for us to differ at this point, considering we've been agreeing on a lot of stuff up till now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of hyping this up a little bit, but I think ultimately we do agree in a lot of ways, right? Like, I see what you see in this game. It's just not as appealing to me, and I think you, for the most part, like, recognize and acknowledge many of my problems with it.
And on the flip side, there are things that I understand are not good about the game that simply don't bother me the same way, or I take them in stride and try to have fun with them when they're objectively bad things.
Exactly. I mean, I think that that's really what it boils down to. We both acknowledge this game's strengths and weaknesses. It's just a matter of how much we're willing to put up with and how much enjoyment we get out of different things. But I mean, I was miserable for a lot of this game. I have gone on record, and I still stand by this, saying that the middle stretch of the game is actually quite good. I really like I would say like chapter 13 through 20-ish, and then a few like other chapters here and there. But I think like the early game really just doesn't vibe with me, and then the late game is kind of a mess as well. So I mean, let's start like, we could take it kind of, maybe not chapter by chapter, but maybe kind of like arc by arc. First few chapters I think are fine. 1 through 3 is like all solid for the most part. I don't like Thracia Fog of War. I actually really, really, really don't like Thracia Fog of War. All of those maps are like some of my least favorite in the series, just by merit of having Thracia Fog of War. So
yeah, it depends for me. Some of them, I think, the maps are just easy enough that even if the fog is there, it doesn't completely ruin it for me.
Mm-hmm.
But if a map is challenging and has fog, it's like, come on, this is not necessary.
Yeah.
This is just making the map suck for the sake of making it suck.
Yep, exactly. I feel the same way. I think even when it's easy, it still gets to me. A lot of my problems with this game are more matters of principle than they are like actual problems in practice. I think the 1 to 99 hit thing is a perfect example of that. I can count on my hands the number of times that actually made a significant difference in what I was doing, but it's still just like, why? Like what for me, it doesn't really add any benefit to the game, and its potential to screw me over just kind of gets to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if anything about the hit formula is worth critiquing, it's that the way stats are designed in FE5 and the stat like caps and stuff means that a lot of hit rates kind of plateau at certain points, where you always kind of have an annoying chance to get hit, even if you're pretty evasive.
Yeah.
And you always have a somewhat decent chance of missing. So, like, even if the game had 100-0 hit calculations, up until, like, the late game where you start to get, like, capped skill and speed, like, infantry units and stuff with, like, really high hit perfs or, like, A-rank weapons, like, master weapons and stuff, and, like, silver swords, up until that point, the hit formula doesn't actually affect all that much. Because most of your characters are going to hover in, like, 80 to 60 hit range.
I think
and then their dodge chances will hover in like the 20 to 40 to 50 hit range, depending on how good they are.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I definitely noticed the same thing. I think a part of it is the weapon triangle. I haven't actually really talked much about the weapon triangle, but in this game it is much. I guess nerfed is the wrong word, but it's the stat bonuses.
It's understated. It's very undertuned.
Yeah, exactly. It's very minor, especially compared to FE4, which was like crazy. But most games, I think it's like 10 plus 10 hit and avoid if you have advantage. Whereas in this game is like plus 5, which doesn't seem like it would make a big difference, but I do think it contributes somewhat.
I think it's usually plus 15 or plus 20, and then in this game it's plus 10 or something.
Yeah, it's not. It's a.
And in some games, it also scales with your weapon rank.
Yeah, that too.
Like the weapon triangle becomes more effective as you get higher proficiency.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it's just like that little bit more, like 5% extra chance to get hit if you are like a sword fighter fighting an axe user, that kind of thing. So, and then it's less easy to secure kill. This is more where I noticed that it's less easy to secure kills on like evasive sword units if you're using a lance.
Yeah, it doesn't help that a lot of cavalry units have low like agility stats, basically, like skill, speed, luck. Finn is like by far the most accurate cav in the game because he has the brave lance, and which gives him a bunch of luck, which bumps hit up, and then he has supports with two of your like common like must deploy sort of characters,
Mm-hmm.
Leaf and Nana.
Yeah.
I think he also supports Glade too, which is like a whole bunch of different ways to get hit and avoid.
Yeah. So, and then like Fergus is pretty accurate, I would say, for the most part. But then like Hicks, Brighton, oh god, Brighton. Those guys are tough. I guess that's a good place to start talking about Manster.
Oh boy.
So why don't you tell me about Manster? What are your thoughts on the Manster arc?
Parts of Manster are completely terrible, and parts of Manster are some of the best moments in the entire series. So I end up coming down to liking it overall.
That's fair.
4X is like inexcusably awful. Chapter 5 is it's literally like cordoned off between my literal favorite set piece in the series and a boring hallway map with just a big pile of enemies that you have to slog through to get to Nana. It's just like the LTC stuff with like movement stars and like rescue dropping Leaf and using the door opening to teleport Leaf up to the top to make him move faster. Is like there's cool LTC strats in this chapter, but for casual play, this chapter's a nightmare.
Yeah,
it's just like
absolutely. I mean, I would agree. I noticed you skipped chapter 4.
Chapter 4 is just like I've played that chapter so many times that I might just have Stockholm syndrome, and I don't hate it.
Yeah,
but it is objectively a bad map.
Yeah, I mean, I think my problems with it are definitely like I think I hate it more than the average person. It's probably gun to my head my least favorite map in the series. I just think it's so tedious. The randomness elements kind of make me feel frustrated whenever I try to replay it. Like I reset and it's like, okay, well now the lockpick is like in a way more inconvenient spot. There's very few ways to mitigate crit. I'm not save stating, so I can't just like pop a save state before the final room fuckbox. There's just a lot of things that can go wrong in that map. Manster in general, I think, is characterized by a lot of things that I find very frustrating. Low hit rates, basically across the board. The fact that like you have very like, I think Chapter 4 could be interesting because they're just like throwing enemies at you like crazy. But because you have so like your resources are so limited that fighting enemies feels bad, because if you break your iron sword on Matcha or whatever, that's it. Whoops, you don't have one anymore. You have to get through the next like 4 maps without one. So I don't like Chapter 4 to say the least, but I agree with everything you said about Chapter 5. I think the narrative set piece there is really cool, but the actual gameplay is just so fucking tedious. And nothing, like, it's not even bad necessarily. It's just like there's nothing in there that's actively frustrating. It's just boring.
It's just FE6. It's the same situation as FE6 Chapter 8, but
yeah,
less bad.
I actually prefer Chapter 4X to 4 because in 4X all the luck, well, not all, but most of the luck elements are like front loaded. If you get through the first like 2 or 3 turns, you're probably fine. Whereas Chapter 4, a lot of things can go wrong at like any point, especially towards the end with the final room. And it's kind of like a pick your poison thing. I definitely hate Thracia Fog of War enough to have it near the bottom for me as well. But then after that, it gets fine again. I think Chapter 6 is pretty good. I have like a minor grievance with it that I used to like really dislike about it. But in more recent years, I've kind of come around and been like, well, it's not that bad. Which is that Karine tells you, like, gives you advice to play the map in just the most boring way possible. And so I did it that way because it seemed like the way the game wanted me to do it, and I had a miserable time. Which I think is at least partially on the game, but I get why it's not, like, fair to necessarily say that the map is terrible for that reason.
Effectively, they're trying to... It's Kaga's, like... insane. I don't even know if it's kind of insane, but his philosophy that if I'm going to design a map with a ridiculous challenge, I want to try to give the player a backdoor of some sort if they really can't keep up with it.
Yeah.
And in this case, trying to engage with that big body of enemies and trigger Galzus early is like a huge because there's like meteor tome guys that spawn. Galzus is unkillable and will one shot all of your units. It's just like engaging with that main body of enemies is like a lost condition basically, and he didn't want to like basically have players just charge at it.
Yeah,
because from your starting position, you can run to that group of enemies pretty much instantly, which is why in the like actual playing of the map, you sort of do the middle ground, which is you kind of like have your like weaker like utility units scurry off to the side. And then you have your cav units strike out into the town, trying to avoid the soldiers for as long as possible. And then once you hit your breaking point, either because one of the soldiers rolled a move level up, or because you decide, like, okay, this is when I start fighting the enemies. You break stealth, you start fighting, and then you push into the town and get all the houses as quick as possible, then you get out.
Yes. What you have described is a very
yep.
is the fun version of Chapter 6. The version that I experienced on my first playthrough was Karine saying, hey, I can fly everybody over the wall. And I was like, all right. And then I just had her fly everybody over the wall. I had her visit the houses like by herself, and it took like a million turns and it sucked. But I'm not going to hold that against the chapter necessarily.
Yeah, I don't think it's bad that she tells you that because... it is legitimately a good strategy. It's just boring.
Yeah, it's good in the sense of like...
the thing is, a lot of good strategies in FE5 are boring.
Yeah, exactly. Which just...
unfortunately.
Yeah, it that does kind of like touch on a point that I know, you were in voice chat with me when I was finishing the game, and you saw my turn counts, and you were like, hey, I think I might know why you don't like this game. And I think that kind of like speaks to it, right? Where it's like a lot of the most reliable strategies in this game are boring. And I tried to like keep it reliable. While also like I'll admit it, I'm not that good at Fire Emblem. So the most reliable strategies for me oftentimes ended up being like very turtley, very boring. So I think you have you kind of have a good point there. But I do think that part of it is that the game kind of facilitates that a little bit. Not always, but sometimes.
Yeah, I think basically I actually wrote this down in my like 5-minute like notepad of bullet points. A risk versus tedium mechanic, which is kind of a thing in other FE games, but I think is very exemplified by this game's like aggressive like hit rate issues and like kill confirming issues, especially with capturing, where capturing is like a huge risk mechanic. Ballistas, status staves, siege tomes, like the safest way to deal with those things is to have a charge unit sit at the edge of the attack range and take 2 shots a turn while you have a healer stand next to them and heal off the damage until they run out of ammo, and then you just walk through the now safe zone.
Yes,
because you can have Dagdar or whoever you give the charge manual to just stand at the edge of a ballista's range for 5 turns, mashing end turn. You drain all 10 bullets. You heal up Dagdar. You keep walking. You could do that for every single ballista in the game, pretty much. Besides, like, the Chapter 14 ballistas and the Chapter 12 ballistas. No, chapter 11 ballistas.
Yeah. And it sucks.
I always get... Yep, but it's like, it's basically the game saying, do you want to be risky, or do you want to be safe? But being safe is going to cost you fun.
Yeah.
And it's like...
That's interesting for sure. I don't think that that's necessarily... I mean, like, I don't have a problem with that. Personally, I think... I do think... And I don't know if I'm just speaking for myself here, but I have basically never not had access to save states in Fire Emblem before. I mean, the more modern games, obviously, like Awakening and Fates didn't have save states, but then after that, you have the turn wheel mechanics in FE15 and 16. So,
yep.
It's really easy to just like forget that these games are designed for you to get through. Usually, like sometimes, especially in the mid and late game, the maps are quite long, and you're supposed to, you have to get through them, and either, if you fuck up, you either let the unit stay dead, which sometimes, especially in this game, is just a mistake, like a misplay, or you reset. And I mean, it's just, I really didn't want to do that in a lot of these maps, so I did, make that choice. Not always, but I did often make that choice to sacrifice the fun for the strategy that was going to actually get me through the map, without having to reset. So, I don't know.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it was originally one of the core philosophies of this series that FE4 was the only game so far to really discard the letting people die is actually okay philosophy. FE4, you're really not supposed to let people die because you have a safe return thing.
Yeah.
You can do it if you want, but there's really no reason to let someone stay dead because you effectively have built-in save states.
Oh yeah, that too. Yep, absolutely.
You can do a reset to your castle save if you want, or reset to your chapter save if you're really deranged.
God, I couldn't even fucking imagine that. Oh my god.
I'm sure there's some kind of crazy purist out there who's like, yep, if someone dies, I reset to the start of the chapter, and I don't want their life for a minute.
Me neither.
But IV5 still subscribes to the idea that letting units die is okay. So the fact that the game regularly points out, like, we might have to sacrifice a few units to get to this part, when it's a map with, like, a firing squad of 20 ballistas, and it's like, well, yeah, you did just put all these ballistas there and then tell me to throw units into the meat grinder.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, game, I understand what you're going for. It's just like...
Yeah.
It's a very specific design philosophy.
Yep, and I think I'm much less willing to meet it on its own terms than you are, which I think is definitely, like... I don't think that that's necessarily a good or a bad thing. Like, I'm not going to say that you shouldn't meet it on its own terms. But I also think that you would agree that it's fair for me to say, like, no, I'm not fucking doing that.
Well, the problem is that you can just use saves. Normally, you can just use save states to not have to both meet it on its own terms and not inconvenience yourself with units dying or having to reset a whole bunch. You can play risky and aggressive and fast and then just reroll if it goes wrong. Which obviously is not applicable to this, which is why we have to take the whole, like, risk versus fun and death is okay stuff into account in the first place.
Yep.
Because if you're save stating, you can go for the risky, like, boss capture, or go for the crit, or go for the, like, low percent, like, Dagdar hammer hit on some boss on a throne, or whatever. Like, you can do stupid stuff and get away with it because you have a undo mistake button.
Exactly. So after Manster, we get, like, the series of like recruiting guys and going to Tara. I don't think any of those maps are particularly egregious outside of the Fog of War.
Yeah, you could take issue with Kemp's Trap in Chapter 11, but I think that since it's literally a trap...
Yeah.
It does, like if you're gonna act, it's a good trap too. Trapping two people in a room with ballistas to try to kill them is like, well, shit. It's probably the most effective trap in the entire series.
I mean, I agree. I think that you could tweak it and have it be better you know, like I think that
the ballistas should be spaced apart a little more. There shouldn't be like as much ballista overlap. Like Fred should not be able to get shot by 2 ballistas right away.
Yeah, I agree. And then I also think you might disagree with me on this, but I think 6 doors is a little overkill. I think they probably could have gotten away with 2.
It could have been 2 doors. Yeah, 3 is like a little crazy. When I was doing a couple of maps, like, and I was like, maybe I should go without save states for a bit just to see. And I had to do a lot of rescue dropping and like stuff to try to keep Lippis safe. Like rescue dropping him out of range of both ballistas so that he wouldn't get like instantly killed.
Yeah.
Because mine could narrowly survive 1 ballista shot, and I just had Lara go to the bottom doors and just hide at the bottom because she would get 1 shot.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's do this the slow and not getting Lippis peppered full of holes way, which took a while. Normally, I just brute force it with. I mean, I do usually have Lara go down even when I'm using save states, but just having Lippis stand there and try not to get killed by ballistas, it was a little skill issue.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle with that map a lot. I think one of my biggest like flaws I guess not flaws, but like one of the things that makes FE really hard for me is that I tend to have very bad spatial awareness. So I will often just like forget that a character is in range of both ballistas. I had to reset that map maybe more times than any other map in the entire game, just because like I accidentally put somebody in range of both ballistas and they died. It you know, that's not like the game's fault. That's just me being bad. But I do think that it was frustrating for me. I think that the saving grace for that map is that like if you're okay with passing up 11x, which as far as guidance go, I think 11x is one of the more skippable ones. I think, you know, the fact that you can just like leave Leaf at the bottom and then just go and do the map normally makes it a little bit like you have an out basically. You don't have to engage with that if you really don't want to, which is where like why I think it doesn't. I don't hate it as much as I do maps like Chapter 4 and Chapter 22, which like force you to engage with its bullshit, unless you have like very specific things. But yeah, so Chapter 11 definitely I struggled with a little bit. Chapter 12X definitely. I don't think that's like a hard map or anything like that. But I think it highlights kind of the difference in experience that I'm getting by playing these games without warp skipping. I know this is a topic of a lot of debate that I've you know in the Discord channel that we're both in. I've talked a little bit about this, and there's been like a lot of back and forth about like if this is like the right way to experience the game, and how do you measure something like that. My take on it has just been like I feel like the warp, especially in this game, in several maps, warp is the equivalent of just having the I think I compared it to the in the newer Mario games. If you die enough times on a level, you can push a block and have Luigi beat the level for you. I likened it to that, basically. I do think that warp is just like a free win button in a lot of these maps, so I felt like it was better to just not bother. But it did run into the problem of like, well, if a map is designed around you warp skipping it, like, how does that fall into it? And I think Chapter 12X is like probably the first big example of that, because I think it is very much intended for you to warp Lara to the end. I mean, that's how it felt to me, at least. I don't know about you.
I mean, I think that like the act of like directly warp skipping a map is literally a get out of jail free card. If you don't feel like engaging with the map for whatever reason, like any map where Syas is on it, it's like, okay, I'm just gonna turn off the game and teleport Leaf and then teleport Asphalt and win, and then move on to a map where I don't feel like I need to do that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. I think more so than any other game in the series, this map is designed around you using the warp staff. So it's hard to kind of like ride that line. I used it. I didn't ban warp outright. I have a pretty like, I guess, flexible definition of warp skipping. but I was still willing to use warp to like make getting objectives easier. I used it liberally, especially in the last few maps of the game. I used it a lot in endgame to get people into rooms and stuff like that. So I still had fun with it. I still used it, and I think in a way that was intended. And I think it was fun. I just had a problem with being like, oh well, I can just chapter 22, more like chapter. I didn't play this fucking map. After that, it's the mid game, and I like the mid game quite a bit. I think chapters 13 through what would I say, chapter 20 or 21. I'd say that stretch of the game is quite good. I think we're in agreement on that, right? Do you have any maps in that stretch that you particularly dislike?
I think the only real like bad map up until like some of the late game like things is like obviously I think 16A is kind of like a slog. I don't think it's a bad map, I just think it's kind of boring.
Yeah, that's fair.
16B is also in kind of the same boat where the warp tiles aren't the issue, it's the annoying enemies and the slow terrain movement rather than the warp tiles. The warp tiles are barely relevant at all.
Yeah, at worst they kind of just inconvenience you.
And then 17A is like besides Saya, 17A is pretty interesting. It's a pretty difficult map too.
Yeah. 17A was good.
Which I like because it's literally what August says, like, oh yeah, we could totally charge in the front door and we'd all get killed. And literally, and then 17A is like Sayas and the Pegasus Knights and the Dark Bishops and the huge horde of Frege soldiers and all the terrain, like rivers and stuff you have to navigate. You have to recruit Sarah, and Misha is especially hard to recruit.
Yeah, but it's good. Like that to me, that like it feels good. Like that kind of difficulty feels like, okay, it's posing a challenge to me, and I'm overcoming it. I'm using strategy to kind of like, to overcome odds that are difficult but not insurmountable in a way that feels really satisfying. That I think that really works for me. I think 17A is one of the better chapters of the game for sure. And then we get the whole chapter 18, 19, 20 stuff. Gameplay wise, actually, this is like maybe the best 3 chapters in maybe the entire series, like back to back. I think chapters 18, 19, and 20 are all really, really good. 19 particularly is my favorite chapter in the game because I think the gameplay story integration, which is excellent throughout the entire game, is like at its peak in chapter 19. The feeling of like, you could let your units get captured and run away, or you could like try to help them or save some of them but not all of them. I don't know, it's a cool map for like making decisions that I really like. I don't know. I like chapter 19 a lot.
I think the crazy thing to consider is that imagine you're a blind player who doesn't know about the prison map.
Yeah.
And you have to decide, am I leaving my army to die, to run away, or am I going to risk everything to run out and try to secure them an escape route? Like, Imagine you don't know that in literally 2 maps.
Yeah.
Or 3 maps. You get to go rescue them.
Yeah.
Like, it's a cop-out, of course, but, like, it's still like in the moment it's like a and then I think later the experience will be, even though like we can say like, oh, it's a cop out, in the moment you're gonna be like, oh, I can go save my people, I could go save Dulcian from when I left him to die like 10 chapters ago. Yeah, because he's a stinky armor knight.
Yep. Yeah, I think I strongly advise against playing this game blind personally.
Please do not. But please at least look up like some kind of basics guide. Or, like,
I
look. Yeah.
I think your chances to enjoy this game are highest when you have WAD pulled up the entire time. Personally, but I think that this is one instance where playing blind not only improves the experience but improves it like a lot. The fact that that you're getting your characters back in 2 chapters or whatever does kind of lessen the impact of 19 a fair bit for me.
But I think the gameplay of all 3 of the chapters is very different from each other. It's like a 3-chapter roller coaster of a siege, one way, and then an escape, and then a siege the other way. You get all three of the main gameplay formulas effectively back to back to back.
Yeah.
Because you start sieging a castle, and then you're escaping to a castle, and then you are withstanding a siege in a defend map in another castle. I just think it's so cool that all of those maps are like effectively like some of the flagship versions of their level editions, and
For sure.
they're all like they all have a lot of interesting stuff going on. Chapter 18 of FE5 is one of the most like dense chapters in the entire series,
big time,
in terms of things that are happening.
Yep, absolutely. Got the member card,
and the member card, the dancer room, which is just there for some reason, the prisoners on the left, the rework guys in the middle, the whole middle room with Xavier, like the Leinster soldiers for the member card, and then chapter 19 is funny because of all the things we've already said, but I was thinking my favorite thing about chapter 19 is figuring out how to most optimally get someone captured. And the easiest way to do it is to have Sleuth get warped to Amalda. Like if you're playing A route.
And then just get captured.
And then let Sleuth get captured and then have Amalda run away. Because she's a cab and she can escape.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you can do the same thing with in B route with Miranda. Miranda is like really good capture bait.
Mm-hmm. And then chapter 20 is a defend map, and it's not quite as much of a doozy as chapter 14 in terms of the pure difficulty.
No,
but in terms of the things that are happening on the map, it's like, wow. There's a lot going on here with like the prisoner room is so cool.
Yeah, the fact that they unlock that's such a fucking cool it is. This is one of those like cinema sin styles, like who gives a shit, but it is kind of weird that they had their weapons. But whatever, like who gives a fuck? It's still fucking awesome, honestly.
Yeah. And then like the ballistas coming in and the boss being briefly unkillable, which is very funny.
Yeah,
and having the options to either like put like in reality, once you're more familiar with the map, it kind of ends up being you just like spawn killing all of them as they spawn in. Mm-hmm. If you really just like clear out the whole bottom and then like just like all of your units are just standing there at the spawn points, spawn killing.
Yeah, I didn't do that, so I actually the fucking ballista are so strong. I think I lost.
They're pretty nasty.
I lost Xavier there because he has charge, I think, and he took like 8 damage from ballista. They're fucking strong.
Yeah, no, because the thing is that your defense caps at a point. There's nothing you can do to prevent ballistas from damaging you.
So, but yeah, chapter 20 is good. I think it's definitely the inferior defense map. But I still think it's pretty good. I think Kaga knew how to design a defense map. And I think later games definitely their defense maps are, to put it nicely, less than stellar, especially in like 7 and 8.
Yeah. The thing about the defense maps in later games is that the maps are very story driven defense maps in FE5.
Mm-hmm.
And usually when there's defend maps in FE7 and FE8, it's less story driven. And it's not always good in Tellius either. How many defend maps even are there in Tellius? Are there any?
Well, there's in like pure defend maps. I don't think there's any
like pure defend maps, but like defense. There are some like mixed defense objectives in Tellius, and some of those are very good.
Yeah, I mean 313. We're getting ahead of ourselves by quite a bit, but 313 is one of my favorite maps in the series.
Yeah, like Tellius has some like great like defense map options. Like in it that are again integrated with the story very well, so it's like Tellius gets to lead back a little bit. And well, I mean, Path of Radiance is my second favorite story in the series, so Tellius is definitely doing something right in the storytelling regard. Yeah. And then Fates, of course, has its infamous defend map.
Oh, that's another really I mean, some defend map, like I'm mostly thinking of like FE7 because the FE7 defend maps are just so fucking boring.
I'm more mean. It's not necessarily infamous as a negative thing. Just everyone knows about.
Conquest 10. Of course.
But like, Conquest 10 is like a great map. It's just like one of the best maps in Fates in general, and it's like well integrated into the story ish. I mean, as well integrated as you can be into Conquest's story. And like the map, it's the best part about early game Conquest is that levels are more puzzle like because they have pretty strict control over what your units can be at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So up until like kind of like the mid game, they give you a lot of structured things to do with your characters, and Chapter 10 gives pretty much every single unit something to do besides like Mozu, where like the second ballista memes are like
No, I
all that she really has going for her, and she's an optional character. So if anyone's going to feel superfluous, it should be her.
Absolutely. I also think that like I think that what separates a good defend map from a bad one is that like Kaga and I think the Tellius game designers and whoever the fuck was behind Conquest 10, that fucking absolute masterpiece of a chapter, they are not afraid to put the screws to the player. They actually like make you sweat a little bit because they're putting the pressure on you. It's actually like, you know, you feel like you're just barely holding on unless you're super familiar with the map. You know, like I've heard people say like, oh, Conquest 10 is easy because I've played it a million times and I know the exact places I need to put Camilla to make sure the map is easy. But like if you're just playing it casually, you know, like it really feels like you are like just barely holding on to the line. You know what I mean? Whereas in chapter, you know, in FE7 and FE8, a lot of the time it's so easy to just break out and to like kill all the enemies. There's no pressure. There's no pressure there at all.
Yeah, for sure.
And then we get into the home stretch, the end game. I think that it's a very much an up and down. I think there's a lot of good well, not a lot. I think there's a few good chapters in there. I think there's a few bad chapters in there, and then there's a few like that I'm just mostly neutral on. Sorry, go ahead.
21 is definitely a chapter. 21 is definitely a chapter that exists.
Chapter 21 is a chapter in Fire Emblem Thracia 776. That is true. I was surprised by how much I came away liking 21X. I think 21X is a very fun Gaiden map.
Yeah, 21X is very cool. Like there's a time limit that's just strict enough to be a little bit concerning. It's an escape map that's also a map where you have to go away from the escape point.
Yep.
At the start, like you start at the escape points and have to go into the map, retrieve the thing, and then get back out. Which is very unique. It's another unique objective map that's never really been redone in the series.
Mm-hmm.
There's threatening enemies for once. There's usually not too many threatening enemies in FE5. There's like heroes and like pretty strong sorcerers.
Side objectives in the chests and the warp staff guys.
Yep. There's guys to steal stuff from anytime there's a level with loot crate, like a specific like this is the level where you steal this. I love that. Yeah. I love when a level has its you steal this here thing.
Yep, that's great. So 21X is definitely very solid. I mean, I guess now we got to talk about chapter 22.
Get the Julius voice clip. I cannot stand the sight of Reinhardt.
That's me. We didn't really. I know we briefly mentioned Reinhardt. I guess we might as well talk a little bit more about him here, but he fucking sucks.
Yeah. So like the laundry list is that Reinhardt is like hyped up in the story. We get Reinhardt's sister and the guy who hates Reinhardt, Kempf, and everyone's like, man, this Reinhardt guy, like, they can't shut up about him. The reincarnation of a crusader and all that. And then in story, he's kind of a whipped like lackey, and he just kind of does like he's a bootlicker, and it's like, what the fuck? This is your guy? This is your man's? What a like, just that alone is already a letdown. But
yeah. Then there's the fact that he's just, I mean, he's a child murdering simp.
The child murdering simp part definitely doesn't help either.
But yeah, there's not really a whole lot much else to say about Reinhardt. He's pretty nothing in terms of the story, but in terms of gameplay, he makes quite an impression. With his five movement stars and 5 leadership stars. I mean, Chapter 22, I've already talked a lot about Chapter 22, and I don't know if you are a Chapter 22 stan. I know you had some disagreements with some of my conclusions about that chapter, but I don't think you have said anything that implies that you particularly like it. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think it is the map of it. Like, it's a, I think, as in terms of a challenge, I think, like, just specifically designed as a challenge map, I think it's fine. But, like, in terms of, like, trying to enjoy it, it's like it exists. I don't especially hate it because of how explicit the game is about warp skipping it as an out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, as long as there is a given solution to a terrible thing, I'm willing to, like, cut it a minor amount of slack. But the fact of the matter is that if you try to play the level completely straight, it's just torture.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think I'm with you in the sense of, I think if there's an out and it's like a reasonable out, then I think that's fair. Um, I think having like access to a way to warp skip is a reasonable out. I guess it's just shitty that this solution to, like, oh, well, you don't like this map, just don't play it. You know, as opposed to, like, I think going back to chapter 11, I think it sucks that the central gimmick is kind of annoying, but if you don't want to engage with it, you can still, like, play the map, you know? Like, you can still like go in, you can kill Fred, you can go in and kill the enemies and all that stuff. Like, warp skipping is not your only alternative there. Whereas it feels like it's either you just play it. Like, I think I warped someone to get Sias out of there because I couldn't do it. And then rewarped back. Even like I had to draw the line somewhere. I was like, this might kind of count as warp skipping, but I don't care. I couldn't fucking do it. And even then it was just really hard. I needed to get really lucky against Reinhardt to kill him. And it just didn't feel like I was outsmarting the game. It didn't feel like I was employing some master strategy. It just kind of felt like I was winging it and got lucky, you know?
I mean, statistically speaking, Reinhardt is basically the strongest character in the entire series.
Yeah.
Like, enemy character in the entire series. Like, his sheer damage output and threat level is like nothing else in the series. Like,
it's crazy.
This guy is stronger than most final bosses in the series.
Honestly, I think I would be a lot more favorable on the chapter if they just, like, I think I'd be a lot more favorable on the game if movement stars didn't exist. But I think here is a particularly egregious example of, like, well, I could bait him and try to get him on player phase to make it a little bit more manageable. My hit rates are still in the dumpster, so it would still be challenging. It would just be, like, more manageable. But he has a 25% chance to just fucking run up to you and kill you anyway. So, not fond of that.
It's just like, movement stars just really should not be on enemy units.
Yeah, I think
At all.
that is what it comes down to. I think it's I mean, I think it would be interesting if it was on, like, units that don't move or enemy units that don't move, you know, like bosses guarding gates and stuff like that. But especially on, like, mounted units, if they can just, like, if you're, like, out of their range and then they can just decide, nope, no, you're not. I'm gonna have double movement for this turn. That's just crazy. I don't see why that was considered a good piece of game design.
Then we get to, I mean, like, I guess the only other thing to say is that Chapter 22 does have, like, some map events, like the bridge, and
yeah, there's some cool
Sias leaving, and there's, like, there's all, like, the pockets of ballistas, and, like, a lot of threatening enemies. Like, Reinhardt's, like, mage knight squad feels like an actual, like, squad of knights.
Yeah.
Like a cohesive, like you stare at those guys and go, okay, they've been telling me about these guys all game, here they are. That's these guys. Whereas in other games, it can feel a lot more nebulous. Like, it's very rare for them in other games to be like, this is X or Y squad of, like, the Knights of Bern. Like, it's the guys that Gale commands, or the guys that Brynja commands, or the guys that Narcia commands. Like, it's usually never more involved than that. And in FE5, they have like the actual the different Ritter squadrons of knights from every different like faction.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. I like that bit of world building for sure. I think,
yeah, but that's
I think we can move on to the end game stretch, which is I think it's up and down. 23, 24, I actually think are pretty solid. Not anything special, but fine. And then 24X speaks for itself. Obviously, fucking garbage map, terrible. Everyone hates it. I don't think anyone likes 24. I'm sure someone does, but very few people like 24X.
Yeah, 23 is like a very like it has the Pentax General, which is very funny, but other than that, there's basically nothing happening in the map gameplay wise. And then 24 is, I think, a pretty interesting map overall, but there's a lot to do. Your units are split up, so there's a lot of stuff happening. Galzus is cool.
Yeah. Love Galzus.
I like the whole Kia staff setup as well.
Mm-hmm, me too.
The secret shop is also a complete like shitpost in this game.
I didn't even.
It's in chapter 24. You have to warp someone to like a partially obscured door tile, outside the map, like in the wall, and then you have to unlock the door and then stand on the tile where the door was, and then that's where the secret shop is.
Yep, it's fucking weird,
and it sucks. It's one of the worst secret shops in the series.
Yeah, there's like nothing good there.
Well, it has good items, but you have 2 maps to use them.
Yep.
And it's the cheapest source of Master Seals in the game, which you don't need because your entire army is promoted.
Yep, absolutely. Completely pointless.
The last unpromoted character they give you is like Sarah, I think.
Yeah. And she
has Paragon and like crazy stats and like
good skills.
It's just bonkers in general. Yep. So like
the secret shop. I don't even think I mentioned the secret shop when I talked about 24. So thank you for bringing it up.
Because there's nothing to mention. It's like there are stat boosters there, but stat boosters are very like rare in FE5 as is. They opt for scrolls over stat boosters most of the time.
Yeah.
There's literally only one strength stat booster in the game.
Yeah, and it's like right at the beginning, isn't it?
I think there's literally one at the start, and then the only other ones are in the secret shop.
They're for Avel, bro.
True.
True.
Give
Avel like 5 power rings or whatever, to make her god awful strength workable, and then of course 24X is 24X. I'm quite fond of Endgame actually. I think Endgame is pretty fun.
I think Endgame, in terms of a finale chapter, is way more interesting than most other FE Endgames.
Yeah, because the final boss is incredibly easy, but they kind of balance that out by actually making it kind of difficult to get to him, and having there be a legitimate challenge in the way that the map is laid out, as opposed to like, fucking FE8 final boss, you just walk up to him and kill him.
Yeah, like any final boss map where it's just you and the final boss in an open area with nothing happening. FE8 is definitely the worst version of this. Because you literally start in movement range of the boss and there's nothing threatening around you. All the monster enemies on the map, there are monsters for the final boss map.
Yeah.
There's like a whole bunch of monsters scattered around, and none of them are in melee. None of them are close enough to fight you.
Yep.
And you literally ORKO him with the legendary weapons.
Yeah, it's really bad. I think this is definitely up there in terms of all those. I mean, end games in the series range. I think there are some that are maybe like 1 or 2 that are better than this. But for the most part, like the end game maps in the series kind of suck. So this I think this
most of them aren't even levels.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I think there's literally like how many of them even quantify as levels? FE4, FE5, and then the 3 houses ones.
If you want to be generous, because I know, and you could say like FE7 has like 2 phases.
Yeah, FE7's first part counts as
does the FE
as like a level.
Does the FE8 map before For Mortis count?
Yeah, I guess we can count the Leon map, but that one is also kind of lame.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy, and Leon is very weak.
Yep, exactly. So there's not a lot.
But I think that the only ones that I would really put up are like maybe some of the Three Houses end games.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like the FE10 endgame. I don't know if I like it more than this. In fact, I almost certainly don't. But I think it's solid as well. Honestly, this might be my favorite endgame in the entire series. It's really good, and it's like one of the only ones that actually is good at all, let alone really good.
It's my favorite endgame, I think, for sure.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so we talked about this game quite a bit. We actually had less disagreements than I was expecting. But I think it comes back down to what we were saying about how like there's a lot of bullshit in this game. There's a lot of really cool shit in this game, and I think it's just a matter of like what we see more of and what we feel more of in our experiences with the game.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that is Thracia 776. Moving on from this game, this is the last game in the series. We've talked about Kaga a few times over the course of this episode. And Shozo Kaga is of course the game designer for the first 5 games in the series, and after this he leaves Intelligent Systems, and the later games are not designed by him. And I think you could show someone who has no idea anything about Fire Emblem the games before Kaga left and the games after Kaga left, and there's a very, very distinct difference between them. Kaga's philosophy on game design is really interesting, and for better or for worse, it makes all of his games feel very distinct and unique. No game is like FE5, no game is like FE4, no game is like FE2 except its remake, and then FE1 and 3 are kind of, they're a little bit more similar to the more modern games, but he was kind of just finding his footing, and then of course 3 was directly tied into 1, so they're all really interesting, and I think for as much as the series has benefited in some ways from Kaga leaving, I also think that it has definitely suffered in many other ways. What are your thoughts on that?
This is interesting. I think part of it is that how do I want to put this? I think that you can look at other game developers that are very set on upholding their own vision and pursuing creativity. From Software fans, Miyazaki, the director of the Souls and series and its spin-offs like Bloodborne and Sekiro and Elden Ring and stuff, is a guy that doesn't really care about how well his games perform. Like, one of the most successful franchises in existence, and all of its spin-offs are super successful as well. And he's just like, I just want to make the games that I want to make. And cool. I'm glad that my game got 25,000 awards and made him more $1 billion. Like, great. I'm going to go back to my lab now. And that's like his whole like thing. Kaga is kind of in a similar brand, I think, in terms of he had a thing that he was doing and wanted to do his thing, and he was not as interested in like commercializing the series for the sake of like every sequel is being made because the series needs to continue. He's making the games that he wants to make, and even if a lot of his like some of the things he believes like and some of the things that he puts into his games aren't necessarily agreeable, I think that caliber of creator is something that games need to be more interesting and to have like not hit creative bankruptcy at a point, because there's a lot of stagnation in later FE games in regards to ideas and like shaking the formula, and you get into this bad spot where when they do try to shake things up, they go for shots in the dark that end up missing, and then they get discouraged and try to play things safe. Or they try to go back to something that was already done earlier in the series and maybe mix it up a little, but largely crib off of existent stuff, like Awakening. But I think Three Houses, since obviously they were parading around its connections to FE4, and then you can even go back as early as a game that will soon be very topical, FE6.
Yeah.
which was a retread of the FE3 basically.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't necessarily think that the series is worse off for Kaga leaving, because there's a lot more Fire Emblem without Kaga than with Kaga.
Yeah.
So they were clearly doing so. They were clearly were not doing worse. From a success perspective, I mean, the series was incredibly niche up until the 3DS, and like, I think that at the end of the day, it's really just depends on what you look for in a series, like from a creative perspective, because if you aren't super concerned about that kind of thing, it doesn't really matter that Kaga left, because I don't think that his leaving affects a lot of the core stuff of the games that most people come to the series for. I think it comes to a very small subsect of fans that are like, I want to see this crazy guy do his crazy thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if the game isn't doing crazy things, I'm not interested in it. It's the same way that you get people who like Drakengard, even though Drakengard 1 is a dumpster fire of a game. Yoko Taro is a maniac, and people want to see the maniac make the video game, because they're more interested in that unique creative experience, that unique like game feel, game style, game message, whatever you want out of the game that the crazy person gives you. Kaga is one of those. I don't think he's quite as interesting as most of the other ones, but he is one of those. So that's basically the thing he's got going for him.
Yeah, I mean, I really could not have said it better myself. I think your comparison to Miyazaki of Dark Souls fame is very interesting, because I think in some ways you're completely right. But then, of course, the elephant in the room is that this Thracia 776 did not make $1 more billion. It made negative $44. Part of that is the fact that it came out in fucking 1999.
I was trying to say Dark Souls and Elden Ring and stuff all making a ton of money with Miyazaki.
Yeah.
But FE5 was not a success. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, and I mean, it part of me wonders, like, if it had become like a kind of cult hit, if that was even a possibility back then, I don't know. But if it had, I mean, I guess it kind of is a cult hit, but you know what I mean. If it had done like moderately well, would things be different now? Almost certainly. I just don't know how. But I think, you make a very good point, which is that ultimately, it is kind of a little bit of a meaningless distinction, because, every as much as the series is kind of stagnated in some ways, each kind of era of Fire Emblem does kind of have its own unique identity. Like the GBA games are very distinct from the DS games, distinct from the Teleus, and distinct from the 3DS. Like, there's a lot of overlap, but it's not like, this definitely isn't like a Call of Duty Pokemon situation,
Oh, for sure. I think most of the stagnation comes in from like a map design perspective, and like a objective design perspective, as like strategy, the actual like strategy portions of the game has become stagnant. But most of the other content tends to not be stagnant, with some exceptions. Like some of the games have kind of mediocre stories, but like, I think for the most part, the games aren't that bad about it.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, so with that done, I guess, do you have any final like miscellaneous thoughts? I have a couple, but I'll let you, if you have anything. I know you have like that kind of that quick checklist that you made. Is there anything on there that you haven't gotten to that you'd like to talk about a little bit?
Not really, no. Most of them were just like, in case it came up, have it on the brain.
Yeah.
I don't think there was anything there that I explicitly wanted to talk about that wouldn't already come up.
Okay. Yeah, well, the only thing that I can think of, I thought I had something earlier, but I lost it, so maybe I'll add it in post at some point, but I don't like the music very much. I think this is actually one of the weaker soundtracks in the series for me personally. Yeah,
the soundtrack lacks in variety is one thing. A lot of the tracks are all kind of like military march stuff, or like generic kind of like drum beat, like there's only a couple of songs in the game that I really like. There's like one or two cutscene themes that I like. The themes that are like associated with Leaf specifically are all ones I really like. Like the dun 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 dun, that like jingle.
Yeah.
Uh, that map theme and that associated like cutscene theme that are all kind of that are like two versions of like the same like tune. Those are my two favorite songs in the game and are two of my favorite songs in the series. But other than that, there aren't too many songs from the game I really like. I like the battle, like the regular battle theme. I like, which if you don't have animations on, you won't hear very often. But I do like it.
Yeah, no, it's good. There's some good songs in here for sure. I mean, I guess every other game, or at least most other games, has like a couple songs that I just like really, really, really like. And of course, this is obviously very, very subjective. But this game just didn't really have that for me. There's a few songs I like. I like the song that plays when a unit dies. And like you're kind of fucked.
Yeah, if you're outnumbered or if a unit has died, the sad theme. Yep. There's the game will track if there's a certain amount of enemies more than you on the map. It will also start playing that theme. It's not just when a unit dies.
Yeah, that's cool. I do kind of like the dynamic music changes at times, which the series hasn't really.
But yeah, I don't think you're not alone in thinking that the soundtrack is weak. That's for sure.
Yeah, but other than that, I think I've said basically. I mean, obviously, I've exhausted basically every opinion. Oh, I remember the other thing. This is actually probably my single biggest problem with the game. But it didn't really come up because it's not like map related. The fact that healing staffs can miss is maybe my single least favorite mechanic in the entire series.
Yeah, that's fair. It doesn't end up bothering me because it starts to become less relevant towards the mid game, but I will say also that in my eventually when I learn how to use the nightmare tools and learn SNES hacking, I will make some kind of like FE5 balance patch, and one of the things I'm going to do is hike up the base like staff rank and skill stats of like all of the staff users.
Yeah, I mean, if every staffer started at like 10 skill, obviously it wouldn't matter. If they started at like 8 skill, it probably wouldn't matter all that much. It's just I think the analogy I used in the first episode of Thracia when I was talking about it was like if someone's doing a trapeze act and there's a safety net, and then someone cuts a hole in the safety net. It's not very big, but if you fall into it just the right way, you die. That's kind of what it feels like to me. You know, it's like healing is there as kind of like your safety net of okay, I made a play, I fucked up, maybe I got crit, maybe I overextended a little bit, time to heal up, and then you could just be like, nope, get fucked, and then die the next turn. It doesn't really happen very often. I can count on my hands the number of times that it became relevant, but it's still just like on principle really frustrates me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the only game where you're like, any other game, the healing staff works. You press the healing staff button and you heal. That's that. In this game, there's an uncertainty factor, and that uncertainty factor means that a basic, consistent action in the other games is no longer a basic, consistent action. There's a risk reward to even healing, which is like, shit.
Yeah.
I don't ever feel comfortable healing because I'm gonna miss. I won't miss, but I'm gonna miss.
Exactly. I have not.
And I understand that mentality. I was very anxious about healing staffs when I first played as well.
Yeah. I haven't heard any like consistent information on whether the staves are also affected by the 99 hit ceiling. Whenever I have a staffer that has 10 skill, I don't think I've ever missed. But that might also just
I don't believe you can miss. I don't believe you can miss once you hit a certain ceiling. I believe that's true.
Yeah. Well, all right. So yeah, that's about everything I have to say about this game. And if you're finished up as well,
I think that does it nicely.
Yeah. Overall, I don't think I came away from FE4 with some very surprising opinions. I think there was a lot about the game that I ended up liking more than I remembered, and that I ended up disliking more than I remembered. That definitely didn't happen here. I like it about as much as I did coming into it. Again, I ended up hating Conamore more than I did, and I ended up liking Avel a lot more than I did previously. But other than that, like big strokes, the game is basically the same for me now as it was a year ago. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I just think it's worth noting the difference in my experience between this and FE4.
Yeah, FE4 is also a very weird game with a lot of shit going on. So it's very easy for you to change how you feel about certain things that would get affected more in FE4 compared to like FE5.
Yep, absolutely. Completely agree. All right, well, thank you so much, Spike, for being on with me. I really appreciate you doing this. Okay, I think I lost the part where he said goodbye and thanks for having him and all that stuff. I didn't just unceremoniously kick him out, so please don't think I did that. But yeah, it's always a pleasure to have Spike on. But now it is time for the last segment of the episode, which is, of course, our news. There's really only one relevant thing. Like I said, I'm not really going to be talking about much Engage stuff, partially because it's not really like... It's a lot to keep up with when you could just like go read about it yourself on Serenus Forest or watch a mecha video or whatever. But also because I think I kind of want to go into the game mostly blind if I can. I'm kind of hoping that I can go in with a relatively clean slate. So that'll be fun. I mean, I've been watching like the trailers and stuff, but none of the like the gameplay breakdowns or anything like that. So we'll have to see how that goes. But in terms of other news, there's really only one thing, which is that they are now going to be selling the soundtrack to Fire Emblem Three Hopes, which is the Warriors spin-off, Fire Emblem Warriors 2, basically. I haven't played it yet, still. Seems pretty good. I'll have to check it out at some point. I like Musou games. I think that's how you pronounce them. I like Hyrule Warriors a lot. I might have mentioned this already. So I enjoy these games. I haven't played the original FE Warriors, but I might hop on that at some point. I'm not 100% sure. But the soundtrack, if you're interested in that, it goes up for sale sometime in the near future. Let me double check. Yeah, it's the 22nd of March 2023, retailing at 4,950 yen, which converts to roughly about $35, which is pretty reasonable. It's about $40 actually. Yeah, $36.85 roughly. So about $40. $35, whatever. That's a pretty reasonable price for a soundtrack, I would say, for the most part. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out. I don't know if they're like pre-orders. They're saying that this makes it very unlikely that the game will get DLC because usually the soundtrack doesn't come out until the DLC is all finished. But, who knows, I guess. Okay, and then in terms of what I've been doing, not a lot. I've been playing a lot of Persona. I've been trying to keep going with Trails. I've been playing some Pokemon. I've been playing Scarlet and Violet. Those games came out. They're pretty good. I have a lot of problems with them. I think that they're borderline unacceptable level of quality for a big budget studio like Game Freak. But in terms of like the core design, I think they're pretty solid. I think the open world aspect is pretty fun. But they're nothing really to write home about. I like Pokemon. I like Pokemon a lot, but I definitely wouldn't say that these are like, best games in the series or anything like that. That's about it, really. There might be a couple miscellaneous things here and there, but otherwise, now I'm just chilling, vibing. It's almost wintertime, almost the holiday season. This episode's going to be out probably around the 10th or 11th, so there should be another episode that's coming out right around Christmas time. So your Christmas present this year is going to be hearing me talk about the first few chapters of Fire Emblem 6, The Binding Blade. I believe we're going to be starting with chapters 1, 2, and 3 for FE6, but that's subject to change. We'll see how that goes. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to you all next time. Bye-bye.